Hi, hello, hi. So today, I wanted to talk to you about executive dysfunction. And the reason why is because in one of my last videos, I spoke about studying with ADHD and how I study with ADHD, but I did not address executive dysfunction, which is, it's very hard to even get to the point of getting to those studying strategies when you're experiencing executive dysfunction, and I will explain why. So to start, what is executive dysfunction exactly? I'm so glad you asked. I wasn't at all prepared for this question. So, executive dysfunction, or executive function, is a broad term that refers to the cognitive process that helps us regulate, control, and manage our thoughts and actions. It includes planning, working memory, attention, problem solving, verbal reasoning, inhibition, cognitive flexibility, initiation of actions, and monitoring of actions. So that is what executive functions are. When you are experiencing executive dysfunction, it is basically the inability to execute those tasks. It feels like it's impossible and it becomes really difficult, and that's what I want to talk about today. So firstly, when I learned that these terms existed and that there was a term for this exact experience, I was like, oh. For the longest time, I just thought that those were the symptoms of depression. I thought everything was hard to do because I was depressed, and it's just, oh my god. If a doctor would have just told me what that term meant, it would have helped me understand so much more, so much quicker, and I would have understood that I have ADHD. Anyway, so one might experience executive dysfunction for a number of reasons. It could be because of depression or anxiety, but it could also be because of autism or attention deficit disorder or even a brain injury. Again, it is the inability to execute those cognitive tasks. So how this goes hand in hand with my studying video is that getting to the point of like making memory aids or repeating information to yourself or teaching the information to another person, those are like 1,000 steps ahead for someone who is experiencing executive dysfunction, because it's like, well, how do I get there? What do I do first? How do I do that first thing? It's so big and it's so much and it becomes overwhelming, and it's like, no. So I was experiencing that for a very long time, and I still deal with it now. And what's really helped me with my executive dysfunction is, firstly, just recognizing that some steps that aren't steps actually are steps. I know that's really confusing, let me just explain. So I would read my textbook, and while I'm reading, I highlight. I try to highlight mostly what's important, but it ends up being that the majority of the textbook is highlighted because it is all important to me, because I need to absorb the details between the details so that I understand the main points. While I'm doing that, sometimes I'm reading and I'm highlighting, and I feel like I'm not absorbing any information, but I do it anyway, and I keep doing it. I'll read and I'll be like, wow, I feel like that was really useless, but I still do it, and then the next day I'll read the same pages again and again, and eventually the material starts to become familiar. So even though that feels like a useless task, it feels like a task that's gotten me nowhere, I'm not getting anywhere, sometimes you are. Or just, for example, opening the textbook, let's say we're doing one chapter, you've read all of chapter 1, it feels like you haven't really absorbed any of the information, but you've highlighted and you've read it twice. Now you go to the end of the chapter and there's a chapter summary with some questions to see if you remember anything. And you're reading the questions and you're like, I don't know the answer to any of this. And it's so easy to just be like, God, this was a waste of time. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Try and remember, well, what page would that be on? So then you go back and you go to the page that deals specifically with that question. Then you try to find the answer to that question. You recite the answer out loud, then you take a paper, you write down exactly what the question was, then you write down exactly what the answer was, and then you go to the next question and you do the same thing. And then in your second question, try to link it back to the first question. How does this point relate to that first point? And like, again, these are just small tasks and they feel big, and sometimes it feels like they're not getting you anywhere, but they are. For me, let's say just answering, let's say, okay, the first day I'm not going to go all like nuts. I'm going to just look at the questions and then answer them with whatever I find in the textbook. I'm just going to open the textbook and, okay, question 1, what are the 4 main parts of the cerebral cortex? I don't know. So I go back in my textbook and I find the page with the diagram and I write down the 4 parts of the cerebral cortex. That's it. Next question. What is the occipital lobe responsible for? And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing these things. I know how to write them, but I'm not always sure how to pronounce things because I'm dyslexic, so then I'm like, well, I don't know, but you know, whatever. I wrote down that the occipital lobe was a part of the cerebral cortex, but it's whatever. I go back in the book, I find the part that says exactly what the occipital lobe does, I write it down. Next question. You do that, let's say there are 10 questions, you answer all 10 questions, and then if you have the energy, you could go back over the questions. So reread the question and reread your answer, and it feels like you're not absorbing any of it. That's fine. That's it. You do that. You close your book, you enjoy the rest of your day. The next day, you go back and you read yourself the question off your little paper, then you read yourself the answer, then you close your eyes, and you try and repeat the answer without looking at the paper. That is how I do the part with the memory aids. I start with those little tasks, which is, reading it, even though it feels like I'm not absorbing anything, answering the questions, even though it feels like I'm not absorbing anything, and then repeating the answers, even though it feels like I'm not absorbing anything, and then eventually, accidentally, I end up absorbing something. The thing about executive dysfunction is that it always feels like the little tasks that we're executing aren't enough, so we're constantly trying to get to the end result, and the tasks just aren't broken down enough, or at least that's the way that it was for me. But that's just in regards to studying. Executive dysfunction goes way beyond studying. It could just be in the morning, turning around and my alarm is going off, turning around, reaching for my cell phone and turning off the alarm. That in itself feels like too much for me. It's more than one task for me. It's a lot. I don't have the energy. It is just too much. And it's so hard to try to explain that to someone because it just sounds, again, like laziness, but it's not. The thing that has helped me the most with my executive dysfunction, and I know a lot of you aren't going to want to hear this, has been my medication. I say this in almost every video. I am now on Vyvanse or Vyvanse. It's an ADHD medication, and it makes tasks more manageable. It is normal for me to feel like things are difficult to do, but not that difficult. If it feels impossible for you to just pick something up off the floor, to just open a text message, read it, and formulate a response, if these things feel completely impossible, if it sounds like I'm asking you to swim across an ocean, it shouldn't feel that difficult. It is difficult, it still feels hard every time I need to pep talk myself into checking messages. I need to pep talk myself, while I'm in the shower, it is therapeutic. I envision everything I'm going to do in the day, and then I do it. Yes, there is some therapy that goes into that, of course, but just chemically speaking, if things feel absolutely impossible, it's not always all about therapy. Sometimes there really just is something on a physiological level that is not working for you. Since starting my medication, a lot of things are easier. Just talking to people is easier. Leaving my house doesn't feel as impossible. Feeding myself feels easier. My recovery time between doing things, resting, and then getting another thing done has really been cut down. So I don't have to rest as much as I used to have to, just cognitively. Physically, my body is still the same, but cognitively, it's really helped me. But anyway, my biggest piece of advice for people experiencing executive dysfunction is break your tasks down into microscopic little teeny tiny tasks, just as easy as unlocking your cell phone, opening an application, reading line by line. Just really break down the tasks and appreciate each one of those tasks and acknowledge that they are taking some energy away from you, because otherwise you end up very confused as to why you're so tired. Asking for help is another big one. It's hard and it sounds really cliche, but it seriously really helps. Even, I don't know, cleaning my rat's cage, let's say, for example. I have my rats and I take really good care of them and I clean their cage, but just taking one task off of that really helps me execute the rest. So for example, changing my rat's water, for some reason, is very difficult for me because there are 3 bowls and you can't hold all 3 bowls at once, and there's water and you have to not spill the water, and how do I hold the bowls and open the door and then close the door behind me so the cat doesn't get in? It is one small task that requires many smaller tasks for me in my mind. And it takes away a lot of my energy. So what I do is my girlfriend changes the water and I'll change the rest. I will change their food bowl, I will change their bedding, I will change their litter, I will do everything. But for some reason, the water, that is the biggest task for me, and it's not a big task for everyone, but for me it is. And I ask for help and someone else does it, and it makes it that I end up executing the task of cleaning their cage more efficiently. It makes it easier for me to do that by just taking that one little task off of myself. And also just breaking things down to day by day, breaking down any task into smaller tasks and distributing them throughout the week is okay. So for example, when I clean my rat's cage, I use felt for their cage. Taking out the dirty felt, throwing it into the laundry basket, putting in new felt. Done. Deal with the rest tomorrow. Tomorrow, their cage is now clean. I take the dirty felt and I put it into the washing machine. Then switch it to the dryer. Done. Next day, take the dry things out of the dryer, fold them, put them away. Done. Then the cycle starts over. Their cage needs to be cleaned again. Take out the bedding, put in the new fresh bedding that I just washed. Done. Next day I'm gonna wash their bedding. You get what I'm saying? I'm breaking it up over time so that every day it doesn't feel that big. It's nothing. All I'm doing is taking out the dirty bedding and putting in the new one. The new one is already clean, look. But then the next day it's well, all I need to do is wash this bedding. Their cage is clean. That's it, done. And then by the 3rd day, oh, look at that, you have clean bedding. So if their cage needs to be cleaned again, you already have the clean bedding. It's just not making it into one huge task really has helped me. Anyway, I feel like this video is all over the place. I'm really sorry. I just wanted to touch on that topic so that people who felt unseen in my How to Study with ADHD video understand that you can get to that point even with executive dysfunction. I know what you're going through. I know what executive dysfunction is, and I also deal with it. That's it. I hope this was somewhat helpful. If there were things I forgot to say or topics that I didn't address or parts of executive dysfunction that I didn't elaborate properly on, any of that, just go ahead and leave it in the comments and I will make another video. I will keep making videos until I get it right and until everyone feels really understood. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it and I hope you take care. Alright, bye.